Also, since the cameras weren't in there, when she was asked why hasn't the identity of this police officer or his photo been released after a month, she said because there's been credible death threats against him. There's many things wrong with that. Number one, how could there be death threats if nobody knows who the person is? So that's number one. And number two, a lot of the citizens here made the point, well, you don't have any problem releasing information about drugs in the car or things that basically dehumanize somebody who's already gone. So does that make sense to you that there's been death threats against someone we don't know his identity? And also for you as somebody who's gone through this traumatic situation, how do you feel about them basically trying to paint O'Shea as, you know, a druggie and this kind of stuff when he's not here to defend himself?
I mean, the only thing we can do is just stand up and fight for him, and as for ourselves, I mean, that's something that we got to do, to seek justice. So,
as far as the concerns about the safety of the officer, the primary concern should be the safety of the community. There's more than enough evidence in terms of probable cause that this officer committed murder. There's been no credible evidence about a justification that has been offered, and so if that evidence exists, then you want to complete a thorough investigation. A thorough investigation includes releasing the identity of that officer, just like you would any suspect, so that if there have been other victims of brutality for this officer who has been an officer in this community for over 8 years, and people can come forward to provide credible evidence about his character, about his pattern, and about his practice, those people would be given an opportunity to. Every time they've done that in the past, in the case of Derek Wiley in Arlington, or Roy Oliver in Balch Springs, or this young woman, Amber Geiger in Dallas County, every time there's been members of the community to come forward to offer evidence that has been proven critical, either in their conviction or in the case of Ms. Geiger and in the investigation, because that's part of doing a thorough investigation. It's been clear from what they said tonight, they're not interested in doing a thorough investigation. There's one material witness that's not the defendant, and he was not asked a simple question, any questions whatsoever about the actual homicide itself. He was asked questions about the pullover, about the expired registration and what they were doing earlier in the day, but nothing relevant as to the use of force and the decision by that officer to take O'Shea Terry's life.
And also, as we've seen in other cities all over the country, how could they do an investigation? They're investigating themselves. This is the Arlington PD doing an investigation of one of their officers. We've seen, I mean, look in Chicago. We just saw, very rare, a second-degree murder charge for a police officer, but that was only because the video came out. They tried to stop that, and there was also doctoring of police records and documentation. I mean, I know you're an attorney, so you want to have good faith in your negotiations with them, but how could you expect a real investigation? They haven't spoken with the material witness if they're investigating one of their own.
It is universally accepted as best practice, even within the law enforcement community, that law enforcement officers should not be investigating themselves. Chief Hall in Dallas County made that acknowledgement when she brought in the Rangers to investigate the shooting there, and that's been the Balch Springs. In the case of Roy Oliver, they brought in the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. Departments cannot effectively investigate themselves. It's setting themselves up for failure. But as with regard to the civil suit that we're preparing, it shows that there's patterns and practices that have allowed for this thing to happen over and over again in the city of Arlington. And I want to be clear about there's a bad cop here, but you also have a bad police department, one of the worst run police departments in the country. The city of Arlington have 4 unarmed black men killed in less than 3.5 years. That makes them more bloody than in some entire countries in terms of the use of a deadly force, and a relatively small African-American community as it compares to cities like Phoenix or Chicago or Philadelphia, et cetera. And they're on pace to compete with some of the larger cities in America for the use of deadly force. Moreover, there hasn't been a single indictment. There hasn't been a single time where they've come back and reviewed their actions and said, you know what, that shooting was unjustified, and we're at least going to criminally charge this officer ourselves. It's a very problematic city, so we don't want to divorce the murder of O'Shea from the pattern and practice of the city of Arlington. It's time that the city of Arlington itself be held accountable.
And I don't want to trigger you, so whatever you want to answer is fine. But I just want this to sink in. You know, I'm a white guy, so I got privilege, but for you, I mean, you basically watched your brother, as you said, be massacred. And can you kind of talk to the audience just about like what has this been like for you the last month? Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you?
I can't sleep. I mean, probably on a good day, I probably get 4 hours of sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm losing weight. I go through a lot of stress, you know, since it happened.
What happens when you try to sleep?
I see it. I see it over and over and over the video. That's why it was so easy for me to sit there and watch this video like that, because I see it every night. I see it every day in my head. I see this over and over and over. Like it's gonna be there. It's gonna live there.
And for the audience to know, it wasn't, obviously that was the worst of it, that moment, but you were held there for 6 hours. They talked to you for a few minutes, not about the actual homicide, but about what you guys were doing that day. And then they didn't even drive you home. They dropped you off, what, at a...
QT. They dropped me off at the QT, where my other brother, came and got me. I used the QT phone to call. And, you know, I didn't have no phone, no money.
They took all your stuff.
Took everything I had. I took everything I had, put me in took me to another abandoned house to talk to me, then took me in the squad car and dropped me off down the street at the QT gas station in Arlington. And I clearly stated I stayed in Fort Worth.
So it's kind of like, I guess as a black man, before this happened, you already kind of live in fear a little bit, but this is kind of...
To be honest, I can't tell you what I'd do if all the police cop pulled me over. Can't tell you what I'd do.
And, you know, for the rest of the country, obviously we live in like a Trump media industrial complex, so they might cover other things for like 30 seconds and then go back to Trump's tweets. But obviously, I mean, the systemic, system-wide failure, it doesn't seem to be changing, even though we keep seeing these, you know, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Jordan Davis, Freddie Gray, I could go on. Is it the voting booth? Is it on the ground organizing? We had discussions tonight about, is protesting the best thing? Is economic boycott? I know you're not a politician, you're an attorney, but what should people know? Because the audience, and, you know, whether it's progressive people or just good people, are kind of just like, what do we do? This isn't changing.
Yeah, I'm not a politician. I'm not even just an attorney. I'm a black man in America, and I'm a father of 3 boys, 2 girls. And this is something that that keeps me up at night. And so the answer to your question is yes. When you say, is it this, is it that, it's everything. We have to throw everything at this problem. Quite frankly, we live in not only the bloodiest nation in the modern world, as in terms of the use of police force, but as everyone knows, and we've commonly come to accept, we live in the most incarcerated place on earth. There's no nation on earth that incarcerates more of its citizens. And so the reason that we see so much deadly force is because we've empowered our law enforcement officers to go arrest our citizenry for the most absurd things. And just like any other invading force, you're going to have what they call collateral damage when you wage war against your own citizens. And so we have to completely look at or rethink how we deal with the so-called criminal justice system that has been unleashed on the black community. 1 out of every 3 of us are going to end up in prison at some time in our lives. And when you deal with a demographic in the inner city, that number goes up even higher. And so we're not, one case at a time, one civil rights case at a time is not going to resolve this. There may be some accountability here. We may be able to get some policy changes there. But until we stop empowering the state to incarcerate such a large portion of our population, and it's not normal. It's become the norm in America, but it's just not normal to incarcerate so many human beings, and then to make them second-class citizens once they are released from prison. So I believe the police brutality issue speaks on a deeper issue that we have to address as a community.
Any final words you want the audience to know, what you've been through, what other black men or just whomever should know about what's going on in Arlington and Dallas and all over this country?
I mean, it's clear to see. It's clear to see. I just don't wish this upon nobody else. Nobody else. Nobody's sons, no daddies, no fathers, nobody. I don't wish this upon nobody to sit and watch somebody that's close to you get their life taken for nothing.
Thank you for talking to me. Thank you. Absolutely.